Welcome to the fifth lecture in this series, The Good Lawyer. And today we will talk about the last of the five principles, integrity. Integrity is defined, if you just look at an English language dictionary, as being honest, being upright, and strong moral values, a consistency in adherence to those strong moral values throughout your conduct. That is a very general definition, and it doesn't help you really to grasp what it means, what this basic principle means as a professional ethical principle. It is looked upon as a sort of default principle because if you think back of the other four principles that we have discussed, expertise, partiality, independence, and confidentiality, they all govern a specific area of the relationship between lawyer and client and or of the conduct of the lawyer within the setting, the legal framework setting. So, for instance, independence, we talked about that, is the independence as a lawyer towards the client, but also that you are independent of external influence or other parties involved. So there is a specific relationship that is governed by that principle. Integrity, on the other hand, is much broader than that. And it, in a way, it governs all the other principles already. And then it has this sort of extra that is not specifically governed by any of the other four principles. So in the Dutch context, we would say the basic principle of integrity means that you have to conduct yourself in a way that is befitting to your role and function as a lawyer, which is also quite broad and vague and doesn't help you a lot. But at least you have some sort of idea what integrity means. It also means that you shouldn't, for instance, take a case there in which you, in good conscience, can't see the legal merit. That, for instance, if a client comes to you with a certain problem and he wants to sue, but you don't feel that there are any legal merit to this case, then you shouldn't take the case. Otherwise, you wouldn't act according to the principle of integrity. It also means, at least partially, one important part, if you look at the rulings of disciplinary courts, for instance, a lot of times integrity involves financial integrity. That's a portion of professional integrity. So how you deal with your hours, that you don't overcharge, that you give transparency to your client about the work you have done. But it also means that there are rules with regards to the money you receive. Is in particular, if it's not money you receive from the client as payment, but if it's from a third party. For instance, if you had a client suing for damages and the client gets $200,000 and the opposing party will pay this money into your account, and then you will pay out the client. There are specific rules how you have to deal with this money. For instance, in Holland, you cannot deduct your own fee from this money. So financial integrity is certainly an important part. But the more general rule that you have to conduct yourself like it is befitting for your profession also means that integrity sort of bleeds into your private life. We've talked about that in earlier sessions and also in our tutorials, that there is conduct outside of your profession that might influence your conduct as a lawyer and is therefore important from an ethical point of view. For instance, we talked about the fact that if a lawyer is regularly beating the spouse, even though this is clearly private conduct, it still means that a disciplinary court might look at that and might come to the conclusion that this kind of behavior is not behavior that is befitting to the profession, that it might harm the profession, that it might harm the reputation of this particular lawyer, but more in general, the profession of all lawyers. But the fact that integrity sort of has also not only to do with your professional conduct in court and towards your client and towards the opposing party, but it has also something to do with how you conduct yourself in private, is of course raising many, many questions. First of all, how far does that go? How much of a good person do you have to be, so to speak, in order to have professional integrity? And there is no clear-cut answer to that. Every system will have a sort of different interpretation of that and will allow different things, or will not disallow different things in your private conduct. But it is important to keep in mind that professional integrity is the principle that most influences your private life. The other question in this connection is, of course, what does it mean with regards to your personal morals? If you have moral beliefs that you then want to transport, as it were, to your profession. We have already talked about that in the context of To Kill a Mockingbird and Atticus Finch. Because if you remember, we talked about his oral argument, his closing arguments, and that he wanted to present the evidence, that's for sure, but that he also wanted to change the system. So not something that has a particular role or a particular advantage for this client and this case, but he, in his oral arguments, goes further than that. And some of you in the class, you mentioned, or you had question marks with regards to that, asking whether it's not instrumentalizing the client in a forbidden way. And in a way, it is true. Atticus Finch instrumentalizes this case of Tom Robinson in order to make a broader point. But we also came to the conclusion that as long as this broader point serves the client's interest, there's nothing wrong with that. But some lawyers go further than that. They have, if you will, a moral agenda with the cases they pursue. So you could, for instance, one of the clips that you have to watch for this week is an interview of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, now a Supreme Court justice, but she had worked as a lawyer before she became a judge. And her overarching principle or goal was to do something for gender equality. So she pursued cases that showed that there is gender inequality. That was her idea, her goal, to pursue only those cases, because her overarching goal was not only to serve a particular client, but to serve a broader goal. And you can ask yourself, of course, whether that is okay, whether this bleeding together of your personal moral goals and the goal as a lawyer, whether there should be a strict separation, or whether it's okay to pursue a goal and take cases and argue cases in order to further this goal. Again, this is not a question that can be answered with yes or no in a very, black and white fashion. It also depends on the kind of lawyer you want to be. And there is, of course, nothing wrong with wanting to use your profession as a lawyer in order to further or to, advantage a broader goal. But one of the articles that you had to read for this week poses some questions for the lawyer activist, because it could mean that you have this one goal that you have personally, but you also pursue as a professional, and that your role becomes confused or unclear or murky. Because we always have to remember, of course, that as a lawyer, as attorneys, we have to fulfill a certain role, and the main uh, task is to serve the client's interest. And if you are yourself, as it were, a client because of your activist actions, those roles might not be separated easily. So that is certainly something to think about. How much can you have your personal moral goals influence your work as a professional? But in general, like I said, the principle of integrity is this bigger picture of a lawyer that is a good person, more or less, also in private, and that influences your conduct, even if there is no other specific rule or principle that is governing your conduct. There's lots to discuss when you talk about professional integrity. Certainly, the professional versus the personal integrity, the lawyer with a cause or the lawyer with a mission, and the lawyer activist. So this is all interesting for a discussion, which we will do on Thursday when we have our online chat. So it's good to think about how you personally would see your role, whether you have this strict separation between your professional conduct and your personal conduct, as far as your personal conduct doesn't influence your profession, as I said earlier, but whether let's say a person that is not a lawyer with a mission wouldn't have a broader goal that he or she wants to reach with his work. He just takes, or she just takes, each case individually and serves this case in the best interest of the client. And somebody else might want to use the role of the lawyer to also get to a bigger goal. And it's up to you, within limits, to make that decision. So we will talk about that, like I said, in the online chat on Thursday. Think about it for yourself, what kind of lawyer you think you would be. And I hope you enjoyed this lesson and understood at least the complications and the possible moral dilemmas. And I'll see you or speak to you on Thursday.